November 27th, 1989. Bogotá, Colombia. A fully loaded passenger plane, Avianca Flight 203, lifts off the runway. 107 people on board. Families, business travelers, regular people going home. The plane climbs to cruising altitude. Everything normal, everything calm. Then nothing. The plane disappears from radar. Just gone. Pieces of it rain down across a mountainside outside Bogotá. No survivors. Not one. Investigation begins immediately. Bomb residue found everywhere. Someone had placed a bomb on that aircraft and detonated it midair deliberately, killing every single person on board. But here is the part that makes your blood run cold. The intended target was not even on that plane. One man had ordered 107 innocent people to be killed, just to try to assassinate a single political candidate. And he missed. The candidate had changed his travel plans at the last minute. So 107 people died for nothing. A mistake. Collateral damage. A rounding error in the mind of one man who had so much power. He considered human lives to be completely disposable. That man was Pablo Escobar. And the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 was not even close to the worst thing he ever did. This is the story of the Medellín Cartel, the most violent, the most profitable, and most terrifying criminal empire the world has ever seen. A cartel that did not just sell drugs. It declared war on an entire country. And for a while, it was winning. Pablo Escobar was born on December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia. His family soon moved to Envigado, a quiet suburb of Medellin. His father was a farmer. His mother was a schoolteacher. Nothing remarkable, nothing special. Just another poor kid in a crowded neighborhood with dirt under his fingernails and no clear road ahead. But even as a teenager, Pablo Escobar had something most people around him did not: an absolute refusal to stay poor. His early crimes started small: stealing tombstones from cemeteries to resell them, running fake diploma schemes, stealing cars. Small time, petty, but the mindset was already there. Find the angle, work the system, make money by any means necessary. He was not lazy. He was not stupid. He was ambitious in a way that most criminals never are, and that ambition would eventually make him the most powerful and most feared man on the planet. Cocaine changed everything. In the late 1970s, demand for cocaine exploded across the United States. The rise of the Medellín Cartel was fueled by the increasing popularity of cocaine, particularly among affluent users in the U.S. Rich people in Miami, New York, Los Angeles, everyone wanted it. It was the drug of the glamorous, the drug of the powerful. And Colombia had something no other country could match: the world's most perfect growing conditions for coca plants. Escobar saw the opportunity before almost anyone else. He got his start by smuggling coca paste from Peru into Colombia, refining it into pure cocaine, and shipping the finished product directly to America. Simple, direct, and almost impossibly profitable. But Escobar was never going to stay small. Small was for other people. Escobar wanted everything. He founded the Medellín Cartel in the 1970s together with the Ochoa brothers, Jorge Luis, Juan David, and Fabio, along with the brutal Gonzalo, Rodriguez Gacha, and eccentric Carlos Letter. Each man brought something essential. The Ochoa brothers brought money, connections, and legitimacy. Rodriguez Gacha, known as El Mexicano, brought soldiers' violence and absolute ruthlessness. And Carlos Letter brought something nobody else had thought of. He had a private island in the Bahamas, and he had small airplanes. Letter came up with a plan to smuggle cocaine into the United States, using small biplanes flying from Bahamas into South Florida. They flew below radar. They landed on unmarked dirt roads cut into the Everglades. They dropped the product and disappeared back into the sky before anyone even knew they had been there. It was not just clever. It was revolutionary. Letter's network eventually supplied as much as 80% of all the cocaine arriving in the United States throughout the 1980s. 80%. Think about that. Every gram of cocaine at every party, in every club, on every table in America during that decade. The overwhelming majority of it came from these men, from this cartel, from Medellin. The money that started flowing in was beyond anything anyone had imagined. At its absolute peak, The Medellín Cartel generated approximately $100 million in daily profits, controlling around 96% of all cocaine entering the United States. $100 million. Every single day. 7 days a week. More than 15 tons of cocaine were being smuggled into the United States each day, earning the cartel as much as $420 million a week. The cash was so overwhelming that storing it became a genuine crisis. Money was buried in farms packed into walls, stashed in warehouses, hidden in shipping containers across Colombia. Escobar reportedly wrote off over $2 billion every single year in cash that had simply been destroyed, eaten by rats, rotted by moisture, lost forever in the chaos of too much money coming in too fast. He was hemorrhaging billions annually and still getting richer by the day. By the mid-1980s, Escobar had an estimated net worth of $30 billion, and Forbes magazine named him one of the 10 richest people on Earth. He bought a Learjet solely to fly his money from city to city. He built a private zoo on his estate, complete with hippos, elephants, giraffes, and exotic animals, just because he could. He owned mansions, ranches, fleets of cars, and an entire private army that numbered in the thousands. But here is where the story gets complicated, because Pablo Escobar was not just a monster to the people of Medellin. Not even close. He carefully positioned himself as a Robin Hood figure, building houses in the slums, funding soccer fields, handing out cash directly to the poor, and many locals genuinely admired him for it. In neighborhoods where the government had never built a road or a school, Pablo Escobar showed up with construction crews and cash. Children grew up hearing his name spoken with reverence. To the streets of Medellin, he was not a drug lord. He was El Patron, the boss, the man who took care of his people when nobody else would. And this is what made him so extraordinarily dangerous, because when the government eventually came after him, the streets protected him. The poor hid him, fed him, warned him. The Colombian authorities were not just fighting a cartel. They were fighting a man who had purchased the loyalty of an entire city. But there was another side of Pablo Escobar that no amount of charity could ever cover. When he wanted something from someone, a judge, a politician, a police chief, he gave them a choice. A very simple choice. Plata o plomo. Silver or lead. Take the bribe or take a bullet. And he was not bluffing. Judges who ruled against him were shot dead in their driveways. Politicians who supported extradition to the United States were assassinated in the streets. Journalists who wrote about him disappeared. From 1984 to 1991, Escobar was directly blamed for the assassinations of political adversaries, police officers, and newspaper editors across Colombia. He bombed the Palace of Justice in Bogotá, killing 98 people, and in the chaos, his extradition documents stored inside were conveniently burned to ash. He bombed the headquarters of Colombia's secret police, the Diaz building, killing 60 people and wounding more than 600. And then came Avianca Flight 203, 107 dead, just to try to kill one man who was not even on the plane. Escobar was not running a drug business anymore. He had turned into something else entirely. He had become a terrorist who happened to also be the richest criminal in human history. The Colombian government was overwhelmed. Hundreds of police officers were being killed. Judges were afraid to show up to work. Politicians were being murdered in broad daylight. The streets of Medellin were soaked in blood. And then the government blinked. In 1990, Colombia instituted a program of partial amnesty, promising no extradition to the United States. Escobar had killed and bombed and terrorized specifically to prevent being handed over to American authorities. And it worked. He had brought an entire national government to its knees through pure violence and fear. Then in 1991, he did something that still feels almost impossible to believe. He negotiated the terms of his own imprisonment. He surrendered on his own conditions. Colombian authorities took him to La Catedral, a prison facility that had been designed and built entirely to Escobar's own specifications, high in the mountains above Medellin. La Catedral was not a prison. It was a private luxury fortress. The facility included a nightclub, a sauna, a waterfall, a soccer field, telephones, computers, and fax machines. It was guarded by his own hand-picked men. No government soldiers were permitted within 4 kilometers. Parties happened inside. Business meetings were held there. His associates came and went freely. He continued running his entire empire from behind those walls. The Colombian government had handed the world's most dangerous criminal a 5-star mountain resort and called it justice. Colombia's own people were outraged. The United States was furious. International pressure mounted by the day. And then Escobar made a mistake that destroyed everything. In July 1992, Escobar discovered that 2 cartel associates had been hiding $20 million from him. He had both men brought to La Catedral and had them murdered inside the prison walls. 2 men killed inside a government facility by a man who was supposed to be a prisoner. The Colombian government finally had no choice. They announced they were transferring him to a real prison. And Escobar, knowing that a real prison meant real walls, real guards, and real powerlessness, responded by taking government officials hostage. Colombian special forces stormed La Catedral to rescue the hostages. And in the chaos, Escobar slipped out to the rear of the compound with 3 trusted men and disappeared into the mountain behind it. He had walked out of his own prison. Again, and this time, the entire world came after him. An elite task force called Search Block, backed directly by the DEA, Delta Force operators, and Navy SEALs, was formed with one single purpose: find Pablo Escobar and bring him down. At the same time, something even more personal and more dangerous to Escobar was forming in the shadows. A vigilante group calling themselves Los Peeps. People persecuted by Pablo Escobar emerged in early 1993, made up of his former allies, rival cartel members, and people whose families he had destroyed. Los Peeps were funded by the Cali cartel, Escobar's biggest rivals, and they operated without rules, without limits, and without mercy. They bombed his properties. They killed his lawyers, his accountants, his money launderers, his distant relatives. Anyone with connection to Escobar became a target. He was being compressed from every direction, the government above, the Americans beside them, and his own former people hunting him from within. The empire he had spent 20 years building was collapsing around him in real time. Associates who had once been completely loyal were now turning on him to save themselves. His network of corrupt officials was quietly distancing itself. The streets that had once protected him were becoming dangerous. For 16 months, Escobar ran, moving constantly, never sleeping in the same house twice, losing weight, losing men, losing everything he had built. By the end, he had just one bodyguard left. The man who had once commanded an army of thousands, who had once declared war on the Colombian state and nearly won, was now a fugitive hiding in ordinary middle-class neighborhoods in his own hometown, terrified of the phone ringing. And the phone is exactly what killed him. On December 1st, 1993, his 44th birthday, Colombian electronic surveillance teams intercepted a radio transmission coming from a middle-class neighborhood in Medellin. Escobar had made a call to his son Juan Pablo, and it had lasted just long enough to be traced. The search block moved immediately. They surrounded the building quietly, and on the morning of December 2nd, one day after his birthday, they went in. Escobar and his one remaining bodyguard attempted to escape across the rooftops, armed with pistols, running from tile to tile. There was a gunfight. Escobar was struck 3 times, in the left leg, the upper right back, and finally, in the right ear. He fell and did not get up. The man who had terrorized the continent, killed thousands, bombed planes, bribed presidents, and built the most profitable criminal organization in human history, died on a rooftop in Medellin in his socks. Alone, hunted, finished. But even his death sparked debate that never fully went away. While the official account states that search block officers shot him down, his own family has always insisted that Escobar took his own life, firing a single bullet through his own ear, his signature execution method, refusing to be taken alive. Nobody knows for certain who fired the final shot. What is certain is that when the men on that rooftop looked down at the body, one of the most powerful human beings who had ever lived was gone. After Escobar's death, the Medellin Cartel fragmented almost immediately and ceased to exist as a unified organization. The Ochoa brothers eventually surrendered. Rodriguez Gacha had already been killed years earlier. Carlos Leder was extradited to the United States, where he spent over 30 years in prison. The empire that had once controlled 96% of the world's cocaine supply simply collapsed without the one man whose personality, brutality, and vision had held it all together. Colombia did not immediately become peaceful. Other cartels rose to fill the vacuum. The violence continued, and the cocaine trade never stopped. But the Medellin Cartel as the world had known it, that specific combination of insane wealth, political ambition, and total savagery, was finished. What Pablo Escobar left behind is complicated in ways that still make people uncomfortable. He left behind thousands of graves, police officers, judges, politicians, journalists, innocent passengers on a plane that never should have been bombed. He left behind a generation of Colombians who grew up inside a war their own government was losing. He left behind a country traumatized in ways that took decades to even begin to heal. But he also left behind something stranger, a myth, a legend that grew larger after his death than it ever was during his life. Movies were made, television series watched by hundreds of millions of people worldwide. His childhood home became a tourist attraction. His grave in Medellin is still visited every single day by people from around the world. Some who come to mourn, some who come out of morbid curiosity, and some who, and this is the uncomfortable truth, still come to admire him. That is the true legacy of the Medellin Cartel. Not the cocaine, not the tunnels or the planes or the money rotting in warehouse floors. The real legacy is this: one man from nothing, with nothing, convinced himself he was above every law, every government, every moral limit that exists. And for a terrifyingly long time, he was right. If you made it this far, you know more about the Medellin Cartel than almost anyone. Drop a comment. Do you think Pablo Escobar was a monster, a folk hero, or something between? Because the world still cannot agree. And subscribe, because we're just getting started.